Capitalism arguably is the root cause of global poverty. Poverty, as defined by Google, is the state or condition in which an individual lacks the financial resources and essentials for a certain standard of living. Poverty can have diverse environmental, legal, social, economic, and political causes and effects. Capitalism, as defined by Google, is an economic and political system in which a country's trade and industry are controlled by private owners for profit. As Pope Francis said in a speech in Bolivia in 2015, the system is now intolerable. Farm workers find it intolerable, laborers find it intolerable, communities find it intolerable, peoples find it intolerable, the earth itself, our sister, Mother Earth, as St. Francis would say, also finds it intolerable. Capitalism arguably is designed to ensure that the powerful people are able to maintain their position. It requires unfair trade, unequal access to resources, and control over financial systems to survive. We should clarify, though, that in a sense, it is also thriving. As businesses continue to grow, global trade is booming, and technological advancements are continuing to increase and multiply. But here's the catch. Not everyone is benefiting. Even in countries like the United States, with its reputation as one of the richest countries on earth, progress has been quite stagnant. People living in poverty are increasing significantly over the recent years, and people are struggling to get basic medical care, and yet there is still no free health insurance. Because it allows for the exploitation of labor, this can trap some individuals in a never-ending cycle of poverty, particularly in countries where workers have little bargaining power. And in reality, when you are born into a cycle of poverty, it is hard to get access to opportunities and resources such as education, healthcare, leading to those who are already born into the cycle of poverty really hard to get out of the cycle. If a country is unprofitable in the eyes of that specific corporation, then it does not reap the same economic benefits. And in countries like Mexico and India, private corporations do not employ a high number of workers, which in turn leads to high rates of poverty among the population. More on the rise of dirty industries and capitalism. In capitalistic systems, we can argue that the primary objective is to increase your income to maximize your profit. Dirty industries, like I said before, such as chemical manufacturing, oil production, heavy industrial production, have been highly profitable due to high demand and low production costs. This profit motive often leads to, quote-unquote, cutting corners on environmental regulations, increasing pollution. These dirty industries are often located in poorer, marginalized areas where land and labor are cheaper. The local population depend on these industries for jobs despite the harmful effects on the health and the environment. But just because they need the dollar to just scrape by every day, because these jobs are often low paying, this continues to perpetuate the cycle of poverty. Many of these dirty industries exploit natural resources, which leads to the depletion of resources that the local communities depend on, such as clean water, land, which can undermine local economies, leading to an increased poverty.
As the impoverished are stuck in a cycle, the wealthy also have ways of maintaining generational accumulation of wealth, creating extreme polarity on both sides of the spectrum. Case Study 1, the Nepo Babies. As Urban Dictionary defines it, Nepo baby, Nepo babies, is a notable or powerful person such as a celebrity or politician with a parent who is also notable or powerful, especially one whose industry connections are perceived as essential to their success. Inherently, there is nothing wrong with being born into nepotism. Obviously, it comes with a lot of advantages, the resources, the connections, the wealth. But to imply that Nepo babies achieve their fame or success independent of their privilege is both diluted from reality and undermines the struggle of the everyday working individual. As put into words by probably one of the biggest Nepo babies, Lily Rose Depp puts it, if someone's mom or dad is a doctor, then the kid becomes a doctor. You're not going to be like, well, you're only a doctor because your parents are doctors. It's like, no, I went to medical school and trained. But here's the irony. Having parents in the medical field actually does increase your chance of becoming a doctor too. At the very least, you have support and knowledge, not only of studying the actual content, but how to apply for residency, or to have better connections through your parents who are doctors, etc. When we, the mass majority of people, without the privileges of nepotism, compare ourselves to these Nepo babies who push this agenda that they can achieve this glorious fame and success of their own accord, we can't help but wonder, what are we doing wrong? Is it that we aren't hardworking enough or that we're less talented? No, the truth is that Nepo babies will always have a network of support and resources to back them up. But instead, we turn to those in poverty, and instead of recognizing this systemic system that traps them, we call them lazy. If only you would get a proper job. Well, if only you'd stayed in school. We say without realizing that maybe those in poverty actually aren't able to get a job due to discrimination, due to their race or disability, or maybe a socioeconomic background, or that they had to drop out of school to help with the bills, or because of household problems. The stigma society holds against the poor as being lazy or just a lack of self-discipline and self-motivation creates a social barrier that makes it harder for them to escape poverty. Especially in the countries like the United States, where there is a big emphasis on individualism, this can perpetuate a us versus them mentality. For example, impoverished people are seen as burdens on society concerning taxpayer money, which is used as an excuse to push for control over the impoverished. Like most things, poverty is not isolated. It's deeply intertwined with both capitalism and the patriarchy. Both the media and social stereotypes portray men of color as violent criminals. This perpetuates societal stigmas commonly held against people of color, which in turn leads to acts of frustration. Society frowns down upon men who don't fit patriarchal standards, Eurocentric, wealthy, and heteronormative. Usually, men that don't fit these standards lose academic, corporate, and social opportunities that prevent them from being more financially successful. In turn, being marginalized from their society, people of color turn their frustration outward, and toxic hypermasculine methods such as domestic violence, alcoholism, or substance abuse, and a self-fulfilling prophecy that confirms the bias held by the mainstream against the impoverished. This leads to higher incarceration of people of color. For example, in the U.S., black men are twice as likely to be incarcerated than their white counterparts. If the crime for a punishment is a fine or bail, then that is only a punishment for the poor who are already burdened financially. Obviously, this will definitely be a bit of a generalization, and many individuals born in poverty are able to make it out of this cycle, but it goes to show how gender roles and race is used to prevent those in poverty from leaving, hence creating the cycle of poverty. Women also face social stigmas that prevent them from breaking generational poverty. Firstly, women are not encouraged to the same degree as boys to pursue higher education, especially in the fields of STEM and other traditionally masculine fields, which uncoincidentally are also usually better paid. Instead, women are conditioned to choose nurturing career roles such as nursing or teaching, fields notorious for its persistent grueling conditions while being severely underpaid. Then, women are also expected to give birth and be homemakers, making them significantly more dependent financially on men in heteronormative relationships, especially in more religious or conservative countries. This makes financial freedom much harder for women to obtain, especially if they are devoid of proper education. Furthermore, women in the workplace face so much discrimination, the gender wage gap, misogyny, sexualization. The gender wage gap stems from social stigma that women are dumber or weaker than men, and this results in women being passed up for promotions, not being taken seriously, or patronized in the workplace. Over extended periods of time, this leads to women often earning less than their male counterparts, and their representation diminishing due to workplace prejudice. Working women are also much more likely to face sexual harassment and sexualization in the workplace. These unsafe working conditions for women discourage them from continuing to work, leading to less women having their own financial autonomy. Lastly, why are we doing so little to help break generational poverty, especially if we are so aware of its existence? As previously mentioned, there's the idea that there is a sort of deserved poor that prevents society from properly caring for its impoverished. This is most evident in the cases of drug addicts or other addicts. Thought of as able-bodied enough to be employed, society diminishes their addiction simply due to a lack of moral strength. When there are many factors such as mental health, family history, abuse, etc., and this discrimination prevents them from receiving proper health care, social care, and financial aid, even though we now know addiction is a real mental and physiological condition, not just a lack of principle and moral character. Hence, they are punished for being poor, more than society actually condemns the addiction, such as the recent rise in anti-homeless architecture and anti-homeless policies. This arguably does no good for both the homeless and the city, which spends thousands of taxpayer dollars creating a hostile city environment. Yet this is not in the best interest of its people, rather a punishment for the poor for simply existing. Furthermore, capitalism makes it really easy to exploit people if they are in financial dire straits. While paying workers less than the top 1% the top 1% accumulates wealth exponentially. There is no ethical billionaire, no, not even Rihanna, because in individualistic societies where limited government intervention, democratic free markets soon spiral into crony capitalism. This allowed those in power to influence policies, the market, and the economy as a whole to benefit themselves. And the elite are aware of this power too, so they hoard it. After all, they depend on the mass exploitation of the working class to sustain their empires. Sadly, the people with power and influence to prevent the cycle of poverty are the ones who perpetuate it most.